Hi everybody, this is Carol from Practical Mystic. Thanks so much for joining me today. As promised, I am beginning my series on my modified Celtic cross spread. But what you're looking at on the screen is a traditional Celtic cross 10-card layout with the possible exceptions of how card number 3, 4, 5, and 6 are laid out. Now, when I was learning the tarot back in the late 1970s, there was limited amount of information and books. One of the books, although this isn't the original book that I learned from, I had the hard copy of this and I gave it away, as well as a lot of the books that I had when I first began to learn the tarot. But Eden Gray, this book was very important to me. I think it came out in 1970, and I had the hard copy. I loved it. I loved it. Again, there wasn't much out there, but referencing back to why I like placing cards 3, 4, 5, and 6 is because that is what she taught. Now, and of course, look at the way she spelled Celtic. It was with a K instead of a C, the ancient Celtic method. All right, now look at this. Now, can you imagine when back in the late 70s, I opened this up and I had already had this beautiful cross, which is so similar to the Celtic cross. And I want to tell you a little story about that. This cross was given to me at my confirmation. I am Catholic, and by a dear uncle who purchased it at St. Anne de Beaupré. So again, going back to that time period, my grandmother taught my mother. My grandmother was a reader, taught my mother. My mother was an astrologer. The importance of protection, the importance of keeping your tools of divination clear and unobstructed by unwanted energy. So putting that cross on my cards was perfect. The books talked about keeping an amulet, other forms of protection, and I'm only teaching you telling you what I've done and continue to do. After all these years, I still love my cross. And it's a twofold story. I'll tell you the second part, but I do want to continue and say that if you don't want anything as traditional looking, especially in Christianity, although it does look like a Celtic cross, you may just want to have a beautiful stone that has meaning to you. This is shaped like a heart, or you may want a quartz crystal, or you may want nothing. Now, the other part of that story is, in all the years that I've done readings, this cross, that when I was either doing readings at a psychic fair or going to someone's house, or they coming to my home for readings, many times the person who was seeking guidance coming in for a tarot reading, it was frightening for them. It was their first time possibly. It was taboo. It was the unknown. It was the last thing that you did to get counseling from a tool, from a tarot reader, from a fortune teller, you name it. So when many of those clients and others would come in, and I would, get my cards out of my box and unfold them out of the cloth, and they would see that. Many times they would say, "Oh, I am so glad to see that you believe in God. I am so glad to see that you have this cross." It was an indication for them and their belief system that I was, for some reason, not in accordance with what unfortunately is the stigma or was before of tarot readers, fortune tellers. So this gave them some comfort. With saying that, that comfort allowed them to possibly open up their solar plexus for me, to allow me to go in deeper and be able to receive information from the unconscious that may have been blocked if they were in a state of fear, apprehension, unknown, or resistance. And that is part of what I love to teach when I do teach the tarot, is to have some type of rapport with that person sitting across from you so that they are at ease and feel comfortable enough to allow you to enter into their life and do the divination. All right, enough said about that. So what's the second thing that I do after my client comes in, right? Well, first of all, there's an importance of where they are seated. Again, this is what I learned. This is what has worked for me over the years, and this is what I teach. You are the reader, and it is said that you sit facing south because it is known as the seat of authority. Your seeker, your client, or your querent sits facing north. Okay. I like to explain this reasoning with another part of the tarot. And here you are looking at what is called as the Seal of Solomon, also known as the Star of David, and also known as the six-pointed star. Now, why is this in reference to what I've just said about you, the reader, sit facing south, the seat of authority? Well, let's look here, okay? You have a six-pointed star, which is basically the interlacing of two triangles. The one upward triangle is said to be male, receptive, spirit, fire energy. The downward triangle is its opposite, and it is said to be feminine, receptive, and water, where we have fire. It is water. So, if you are sitting with your back facing north, but your face facing south, which is of course up here, you are, your querent, your seeker, in the water receptive triangle is sitting across from you, and she's receiving the information if we go by this Seal of Solomon. Now, there is so much more that I'm going to share with you today, and that is almost like a drop of water in an ocean about the esoteric and the Kabbalistic information that we get out of this emblem, this seal. All right, I want to begin by explaining what other scholars have said about it. I think that's a good way to begin. Now I'm going to be reading out of this book. Let me see if I can show you. All right. This is a dictionary of symbols. It is the second edition by J.E. Serlo. There you go. Beautiful book. Had it for years. Have no interest in getting any other edition. This works for me just fine. Now, this is what he writes about, and I'm going to be reading it here from you, about the Seal of Solomon, okay? And I think this is really going to explain a lot of things. So let me go ahead and read this to you. All right, the Seal of Solomon. This consists of two triangles superimposed and interlaced so as to form a six-pointed star. Writ and he's talking about Oswald Ritt, and I'll give you a little bit information about him. He's an occultist. Terms it the star of the microcosm, or a sign of the spiritual potential of the individual who can endlessly deny himself. In reality, it is a symbol of the human soul as a conjunction of consciousness and the unconscious, signified by the intermingling of the triangle, one denoting fire going up, and the inverted triangle denoting water facing down. Both of these are, according to alchemical theory, subject to the principle of the immaterial called azot. We will talk about that in a few minutes as well. But the philosopher and representative of the Seal of Solomon as its central point. So azot is the Seal of Solomon's essential point. This is the unknown, okay? The unknown that is being sought in divination. It continues to say the central point, which is the actual, all right. Let me finish that. I kind of interrupted. The Seal of Solomon by a central point which is not actually portrayed, but which has to be seen in the imagination alone, as in some of the mandalas of India and Tibet. So the six-pointed star is six-pointed. This 7 that I put in the center indicates that the unknown, the imagination, which has been divined, which is referred to as the soul, and which is what we achieve in meditation and the other process that we're about to talk about. Okay, so I mentioned 2 things when I read from this book. I mentioned the occultist Oswald Ritt. Now, he was an occultist. I think he practiced alchemy back in 1889. In fact, he was I don't have his tarot cards, the Ritt tarot cards, but he was known for compiling the first set of designs of the 22 major arcanas. Now, he supposedly designed them from the Rosicrucian, Freemasonry, alchemy, and I'm sure many other tools and esoteric knowledge. And it left such a mark on the alchemical community, occultists and the alchemists. It affected one person all of us is going to identify with, and that was Arthur E. Waite. And he then went on from the designs and cards of Oswald Ritt, designed his own cards back in 1910, we know, with Pamela Coleman Smith, and we now know it is the Rider-Waite deck. So that's what E.L. Serlo is referencing when he talks about this Seal of Solomon and other alchemists that this is the key. Okay, now that key, you heard me also say a word called azot. It's spelled A-Z-O-T-H. All right, now what is that? Now there's different schools of thought on that, and I don't want to get into it a lot, but what it is the, going back to alchemy, it was said to be the essential agent to transform. And that is really interesting because we're talking about divination. I'm going to explain this a little more. You are the reader. We have the seeker. And when we do the metaphysical, alchemical keys to the Seal of Solomon, we get to that essential ingredients of transformation. Now, that may not be matter, as the alchemist is trying to do, but it is consciously. Hopefully, the person who is seeking this information now has a change, as a transformation, thinks differently. Okay, now the other things that Azat is it is the fourth of the four elements in alchemy. All right, the elements in alchemy, if you don't know very quickly, are salt, sulfur, and mercury. And what is fascinating about that is the argument with different scholars. Some scholars say that Azat is mercury. Some say no, it isn't, that mercury is needed in the process. The Gnostics are the ones that are not in agreement with the alchemists, I believe. Don't put me on that. But I know that there's a little gray area there. But for our purposes, what I find fascinating is, and let me go over here and get this so we can look at it, is you, okay, going back to the reader, sitting right here on the top, you're the magician. You're number one here on the Seal of Solomon. And we know that the magician is corresponding to Mercury. Interesting. Okay. So the other thing that I want to say is about Azat is it is symbolized also with the Caduceus. In alchemy, the Gnostics' teaching it references the Kundalini, which is, of course, a force, a power, believed to be associated with the divine feminine. Oh, the divine feminine. How interesting. 2, we have the high priestess, right? So we have consciousness, we have unconsciousness, and we really can look at, let's say that the magician, if we're going to look at it with its power, it is the power of change through conscious will and applying it, and the law. Everything in the material world consists of the number 3. So we have 1, 2, 3. Without it, nothing is created, and that's why I put here 1 is the creator, and 2 is the action of the creator. Right? He needs to we have an idea, then we work it with the opposite force, and then we come up with the thing that we created. So we have number 3, which of course is, and where are you? We have the fruition of our creation, or the child. I mean, there's so many ways of looking at this, but okay, so for note-taking, you can look at this as the magician is your will. He is the power of change. He is you. You are enforcing, you are having an intention, you are invoking from above. The high priestess, she's the oracle. She's the knowledge through this spiritual perception, which is really the conscious going into the unconscious, because there is no divination. The tarot is allowing us to get into the unknown, represented by the unconscious. But we need the creator, which is you, the reader, to get to that by using the tool of the tarot. And then we have the Temperance, which is basically the assurance and fertility that what has been revealed, we now have created a new entity, a gateway of life, if you will, with fertile understanding, additional information that we wouldn't have had and couldn't have had without the energy of 1 and 2. All right, now let's look at it in a different way. Bear with me here. Okay, let's look at it as the 6-pointed star and the 6th card, the Lovers. And I want to make sure that this is on your monitor. All right. And yes, you can see it. All right, so let's talk about card number 6, because it is the Seal of Solomon, and it really gives us everything that the Seal of Solomon represents if we look at it. We know that the number 6 is a force of nature, and it indicates, again, cooperation. There's so much symbolism in this card, but we're going to stick with the basics. We're going to look at this man as the magician, okay? And I don't know where I just put my magician card, but here we are. Okay, here's the magician. All right, so we're going to look at him. And he's saying, I need to know. All right? And you see that he is looking at the unconscious, right? Which is represented of the woman. And in alchemy, what that represents is that the truth that is conveyed, you cannot get, the conscious mind cannot approach the superconscious, which is represented here by Archangel Raphael, without first going through the unconscious, which is represented, of course, by the High Priestess. So there is a process here that the Creator goes through the unknown. She, in turn, goes to the superconsciousness and forms a connection, and the information or a new thing has been created. And that can be material, that can be psychological, that can be spiritual, that can be transformational. Everything happens in threes, 3, 6, 9. Okay, so in alchemy, this is a process that the Seal of Solomon represents, that I'm trying to convey to you, is the process of divination that you have by sitting in the seat of authority, that you have the fire energy of 1, 2, and 3. Now, the seeker, isn't this interesting? She or he is receiving all this, which we know water receive, is receptive, is passive. And she has the energy of the Seal of Solomon telling you that we have 4, 5, and 6, which of course we go back to the Lovers, which is choices, correct? But 4 says that once we have tapped in and used the power of 3, conscious, unconscious, superconsciousness, we then commingle or have the result of 4, reason. We have responsibility, we have power, and we have authority. We were just given all this information, okay? Now 5 says, along with that, you have now tradition, religion, spirituality, a sense of connection, a foundation that is necessary in life to tap into and believe in on another level, whether that's traditional religion or that is the spirituality. That has been gained here as well. And of course, 6, you go away with knowing, all right, on a psychological level, we know that through life, our lives are harmonious when our conscious and our unconscious are in harmony, when they are understood, when in Jungian terms or Maslow, we have integrated the 2 halves of ourselves, the 2 halves of our mind, and we have now reached a soul level where our personality self now has been given access to oh God, I'm not thinking about inspiration, insight, truer awareness. I'm having a senior moment, bear with me here, but we are inspired and greater for it. Now, here's where I like to say decisions, 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 because we have the 6, and this is the other 6, card number 15. And of course, we can see the similarities here. So, if we have integrated and we have done the work, and we have the conscious mind working with the subconscious mind, then we probably make good choices, and our lives and our bodies and our spirituality are pretty well working harmoniously. Now, if we've not made proper decisions, then we have what the devil represents. We have limitations. We have false securities. We have fears. We have shadows. And I think I want to backtrack a little bit more, and again, rich in symbology, when we talked about the alchemist, and we talked about the Caduceus, and we talked about the Kundalini. This is all in key number 6. The conscious mind here, or the man, you have 12, let's say, flames, okay? And they represent the personality, what we talked about in Jungian. All of us have personalities and egos, and we're conscious of that, and we have one zodiac sign. Each of those zodiac signs is divided into 3 decans, and that's why the flames are divided into 3 sections. Okay. Now, he knows on a conscious level, he has a personality self. Now, the woman here is depicted, and in back of her, she has the tree of knowledge, and she has a serpent climbing up around it, and we can look at that as the Caduceus, or we can look at it as the Kundalini, which is said to sit on the bottom of the spine, and when it is raised to higher consciousness, it opens up to a new awareness, insight that we don't have on a regular basis. Of course, then we become more in an exalted state of awareness and understanding of life and its meaning, and we understand our soul purpose on a different level and work towards that. Here, it is depicted with wrong choices or wrong use of the divine seal of Solomon. The wrong use of this would create what we see here. Now, you can see that the flames, the tree, has now grown into tails, and they basically represents misuse of power. And they're chained, and of course he misused his personality self and his zodiac sign and the gifts that come with that, the information that you get with that in astrology. And she misused her sexuality, where her sexuality wasn't fruitful, wasn't fertile, and was laid dormant or was wasted. I also look at this as the water triangle here, of the feminine of understanding being depicted in the face of the goat. I see that. That's just me. But here again, this talks about choices and bad choices, decisions, and they all relate to number 6, which is the seal of Solomon here. All right, so what do I have in these corners here as I continue? Alchemists believe that the major arcana can be understood when they are divided into 3 rows of 7. So the first row of 7, of course, would be card number 1 to card number 7, which is the Magician to the Chariot. The second line, which is very active principle, okay, very active. This is what we're doing. This is how the Fool is learning on his path of awareness. Then the second is the 8, strength, to card number 14, which is Temperance. And this is our soul level. This is when we gain access, the center line here. Okay, so this is active, this is the center, and then this is the body, which is card number 15, which you saw as the devil. And it ends at card 21, which of course is the World card. So that is why, I mean, all of that, trying to explain the seat of authority, because I don't like to give out information unless I can back it up with my knowledge and my understanding of why that is. And I do want to reiterate that it's not always possible, but I mean, there is so much Kabbalistic and information to find out about the tarot and why the numerical and the symbols are so instrumental in understanding the higher energies. All right, so let me see how I can continue here. So your client comes in. If possible, you sit facing south. She or he stays facing north. And then the next thing we're going to do is look for a significator. And that is important because if you're new to the tarot, you realize that the significator is the first card that you lay down. It represents the querent, the seeker, because you're opening yourself up and saying, I want information for this representation. Okay? And there's different ways of doing that. And what you see here is a kind of a traditional way. Now, the suit of cups is considered the water signs. And in astrology, the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And if you're going to use a significator to distinguish, let's say, a water sign, then the king is male and the queen is female. And usually the king and the queen are represented by someone who is married and over 21 years of age. You do the same thing for the suit of wands, which is the fire signs, and their astrological correspondents are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The suit of swords for the king and the queen are air signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius. And the suit of pentacles, of course, are earth signs, and they are astrologically Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Now, let's say your querent or your seeker doesn't know their sun sign. Of course, you can figure that out through their date of birth and looking it up. You can also use their rising sign if they prefer. They may come in with a little knowledge and say, yep, I'm a Scorpio, but I only have one planet in Scorpio. My rising sign is Taurus, and I have 3 planets in Taurus. I want you to use my rising sign. Well, then you do that, and you would go for the earth. And if she's married, you would give her the Queen of Pentacles. If it's a he, you would give him the King of Pentacles. The other thing that is possible and very appropriate of doing is you may want to just use the Magician for a male, the High Priestess for a female, and the Hierophant for someone who is religious or very spiritual. The pages of the court cards are either male or female. They're androgynous, and they are youths, and they're usually not married, and they are under the age of 21. If you do readings for someone who is a youth under the age of 21, whether he or she is married, it doesn't matter. However you feel they are mature enough, you can decide to either take a court card or a page. And you may use your own major arcana personality card if you know it. That the personality and the soul cards are corresponding to your complete date of birth, and you add that up. That last number, the first number, let's say that you add up your date of birth, you add it across, and it comes out to a 18. Then the 18th card is your personality card. Of course, that is the moon. And your soul card, you add 8 and 1, that is 9. Then that would be the hermit. So you can use the personality card or the soul card, however you like to do it. I think I'm going to leave it there. There was a lot of information that I gave out, and then when we come back with my next video, I will go ahead and share with you the next step in my process of doing a modified Celtic cross reading. I want to thank everybody for joining me. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'd love to hear your comments, and I appreciate you listening. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.